was a wonderful, full of dignity and had nothing to do with politics. And she just, when we found her, she opened her door and she was completely covered with bruises, and there'd just been a raid on her house. And just with her story, I just realized it made me film I could make. But obviously, I mean, when you know the Chechen people, and I've been going there since 1996, the whole story of the Chechen people has always been linked, even under the Tsars, to resistance, to being those people from the mountains, proud and wanting freedom, and that's always been a problem with the Kremlin. And all the fighters I had known during the two wars, now working for Kadyrov for lots of money. He's bought, I mean, it's not only terror, it's the role of money, and he's managed to just dislocate all spirit of resistance and managed to submit all the clans. And when you see him dancing that dance, which is called the zikr, it was the scenes when the Russian army was bombing, and the old ancient men were coming out of the villages and dancing on the square in the mud, in the snow, to resist against the Russian fighters. And now he's managed to twist that traditional dance to his own purpose. So it is an impression of being in a completely schizophrenic land, and nothing to do with the Chechnya I have known since '96, and where I'd been going for 10 years. And a lot of I was trying to find the people I'd met. I'd say most of them, half of them had immigrated, and the others, a lot of them didn't want to see me. Because for them, I was someone they had met when they were standing and fighting, and they were talking about, their song was Svoboda ili smert. It's like freedom or death. And today they have given in. So it was also personally very, very troubling and very sad. But it was amazing to see the courage, as I said at the beginning, of the people who dared to speak. And I want to pay special tribute to the Committee Against Torture, because thanks to them we made that film. And the sad thing is, in December, their office was raided by Kadyrov's men, and they burnt down his office. Basically, there'd been a terrorist attack in Grozny, and Kadyrov accused, suddenly he said, we have to burn all the houses of the families of the so-called terrorists. And Igor Kalyapin, who is the head of a committee, said, you can't, until they are proven guilty, you can't do that. And the same evening, the committee was burnt down. Since then, just 3 weeks ago, they had managed to rebuild and refurnish and everything, and all that archives were burnt down. And they just opened up 3 weeks ago. And the very sad thing is that the office was raided by people. So the Kadyrov people managed to create a hate inside the population towards the committee and said they were working for the CIA or whatever. And so hundreds of people arrived at the committee, and with metal bars, and broke the doors, and the committee members just managed to escape before they could have been, it could have been really nasty, and managed to escape through the window. And now safely, that was last week. And they are now thinking they're not going to reopen the office. So.
Have there been other organizations in addition to the committee that have been working to help people looking for family members and people?
Of course, at the origin, it's the organization called Memorial. It was an organization created by Andrei Sakharov, and back then, and to remember also for the Gulag memory. And in Chechnya, they had been working. The head of Memorial was a wonderful woman called Natalia Estimirova that I knew quite well, and she was shot in 2009, and she had been documenting the crimes of Kadyrov's men, as Anna Politkovskaya had been doing, and she was shot in 2006. And Natalia was kidnapped, and they found her body the next day with 4 bullets in her body in a ditch. Since then, Memorial then had to close for a few months, and it's been very complicated for Chechen NGOs to actually document the crimes of the regime, because they just risk to be killed. So that's when Igor Kalyapin decided to open of a committee against torture in Grozny, and they call it a joint mobile group. That means every 5 weeks or 6 weeks it changes. So it's never the same people. They're only Russian working there because it was too dangerous for Chechens. You can see 1 or 2 Chechens, but the ones who go to courts are Russians. And actually, they do a fascinating job because it's a new generation of NGO in Russia, and they're not, they're jurists. They don't go into the kind of feeling. They just are based on the Russian constitution, and that's how they managed to actually sue the people from Kadyrov inside, Chechen courts, where all the members of the courts could never give a judgment that will be against the power, because otherwise they get imprisoned. So, but at least they managed to. They had a lot of cases, and people would come there, and they work still with Memorial. But Memorial, it's much too complicated. And for me, it was. If I wanted to film Memorial, but it was too dangerous for them, so I couldn't put them in the film. But they helped me a lot. So it's just very sad what has happened, because that means I think after that film, someone asked me if I had any hope, and I think the hope I had was with that young generation of lawyers and jurists who are fighting for the human rights in Chechnya. And what's just happened is, I don't have much hope left.
As you've mentioned, the individuals we see in the film are very brave and very daring for speaking, and I wanted to ask what steps you had to take to protect their anonymity. I know some faces are blurred and some are not, but what kind of concerns did they have, and what steps did you have to take in the different processes of making the film?
Well, that was our main concern. I mean, basically, Marc, who is here, who's my producer, it was basically we would decided together that we would stop the film if ever anyone was put at risk. I mean, the main concern was for the people who were helping us, the fixers, and for anyone talking in the film. At first, when we had the projects, my project was to find the people I had met and to do a kind of, with the footage I had 10 years ago or 15 years ago, to do a past-present. And then, in fact, it was not possible because the people were too afraid to talk. What we did, basically, I thought I'd go there 3 times and film, 8 days those 3 times, and I wanted to be the season's rhythm, because I thought the rhythm of the seasons was quite interesting on a filming point of view. But after the first filming, after 5 days, we were followed, and we were followed at the bottom of the house we were living. Where we were living on the flat, I was on the 4th floor. That person who was Russian, and there are very few Russians you can see now in Chechnya, was taking pictures of my fixers. So we just left during the night, and every filming was like that. So all the time we were just watching behind us. I mean, I'd worked 10 years in Chechnya. Since then, I've worked in Syria and Iran, Afghanistan. So I tend to know when the first signs of putting people in danger occur. So we did something like 12 travels there. We had 3 different crews. Like I was directing, I had 3 different cameramen. One was from Switzerland, and one was from France, and the other one was based permanently in Moscow. And because he's based permanently in Moscow, it's much easier for him. He works for a news channel. So he could go and get accredited to go to all the official Kadyrov demonstration. So I went there twice with him. But the 3rd time they started asking, oh, by the way, Manon, you were not there during the war? And I said, oh, okay. So I sort of understood they had Googled me. And of course, for films I made before, and in Russia also, I've made lots of film on human rights. So we decided that the cameraman would go alone to film all those scenes with Kadyrov, and we would film a week later all the scenes inside. Also, mostly when we did the filming inside, we would not do it at the same time as the filming of skyscrapers or of Grozny, because as soon as you film outside, you're noticed. So we had to take all those. It was a very complicated film to make, and I thank you, Marc, to have invested so much in, so we could make it possible, because it was, as my Chechen friends had told me, they said, this film is impossible. We finally managed, but we managed thanks to all the little fairies that helped me in Chechnya, and to the courage of the people, and because we had the time. I mean, we would never have been able to make that film in just one go, or in 2 weeks, or in 1 month. So.
Well, I just have one more question I wanted to ask before opening it up to the audience. But on that same topic, I was curious about the scene during Kutayev's trial, and there are shots within, I believe, the holding cell. And I wanted to ask how difficult it was to gain access there and what kind of barriers there were, because that's a very powerful shot and very impressive to have attained.
And that's when the dictatorship kinds of, sometimes you have cracks. Basically, when Kutaev, the very strange thing is, my idea was to make a film about disappearance and the erasement of memory. Forbid people to remember they have lost 1/5 of their population is completely, I mean, it hasn't happened in the recent story, you know, it hasn't happened with Rwanda or Yugoslavia. It's the negation of what has happened. And every single Chechen family has lost their loved ones. Kadyrov even thought at one point he would forbid the word war, like wouldn't be allowed to pronounce the word war. So sorry, the question was okay. The shot in the Kutaev trial. So when the Kutaev story happens, we were filming the Committee Against Torture, you know, measuring the erasement of the memory of war. And then it got to a point, and we happened to be there filming, that they wanted to erase the memory of the deportation of the people, which was going beyond everything, because that particular date for all the clans, even the pro-Kadyrov clan, is the date that they all get together and remind the whole population was deported. And Kadyrov even said that actually Stalin was right to deport the Chechen people, whereas his family was deported. So when I was actually in Ukraine when that conference happened, and my fixer said, there's that conference on the deportation, so I said, well, go and film it. We'd left some cameras there. And we had no idea it was going to evolve in a political trial. And that day it was in Maidan when there were 70 dead. So it was just that, you know, and I arrived a week later, and then it became that political trial, and he was arrested. And from March to June, we were actually incapable of going even close to where the trial was happening, because it was full of KGB cars, militias, and seeing us as foreigners, we'd get arrested at once. And I wanted to go to the end. So I had like 5 different Chechen filming inside with mobile phones or cameras, and I'd have all the sound of every single session of a trial by the Committee Against Torture. So I have hours and hours and hours of all the trial. And then when the actual trial happened, it was July, and now it was like 45 degrees, Ramadan. I was 5 months pregnant, and I arrived in front of the entrance of a trial, and the Committee Against Torture had said, in the Russian constitution, it's written that if you're accredited by the Minister for Foreign Affairs in Russia, you're allowed to film the verdict. And so I arrived with Kalyapin, Piotr, the lawyer, etc., and they say, look at her, she's French TV, she's allowed to film, she's got her accreditation. And the guy looked at me, looked at my big belly, and sort of said, okay, go inside. And that's how it happened. And the incredible thing is that we were even able to interview Kutaev, you know, in his cell, whereas, you know, in France you would never be able to do that. So, you know, but then the next day we had someone from, actually the head of Kadyrov's bodyguards, who was in the lobby of a hotel taking pictures of us and our fixers, and we just left. And that was it. But there was that little crack in the you know, very utter dictatorship that was happening that we benefited of.
I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. So we'll be passing this microphone around. So if you keep your hands up, we'll try to get to it.
Thanks. I just want to know what it's like outside of Grozny. I know your film focuses in Grozny, but what's it like outside? Are there like more cracks? And the second question was, you said there was a terrorist attack or something a little while ago. Was it genuine, or?
That's always the problem. As the rest of Chechnya, I mean, basically, it was so complicated to film. I mean, we did go around. I mean, the family of the 2 girls lives an hour and a half from Grozny, so, you know, they are in a small village. We went through at least 10 towns, and what I saw from what I'd seen during the war, everything has been rebuilt, you know, and you have all those mosques popping up like that. He's getting a lot of money from Arab countries also. He's playing on everything. He's playing on, you know, getting money from the Kremlin and getting money to rebuild, you know, mosques. So money keeps pouring in, and it's also a way for him to control the population. the mosques. There's the school, there's a mosque, so he can see. So many, compared to, of course, what it was during the war, it's true that he has, managed to rebuild, and but all those towers you see are empty, completely empty. And the only, our wonderful actor Gérard Depardieu has a flat there that Kadyrov gave him. Of course, he never goes there. And the joke goes in Grozny that when Putin came to visit Grozny to see the miracle of Grozny city, the stupid thing was that they put the same curtains on every single flat of those towers. So everyone understood that no one was living there. As for the question about those terrorist attack, the terrorist attack happened in December, the day that Putin was making a speech in Kremlin about the day of, I can't remember, the day of, not your constitution, the Union Day, whatever. So Kadyrov was in Moscow. And of course, such attacks, it was a very odd attack because I think it was, they were not very numerous, they were between 20 to 30 people. And they attacked at night a printing house, and no one was there. So, some of the terrorists died and policemen died. But then it was a good reason for Kadyrov to clamp down on security again, to burn all the houses, like tens and tens of houses of supposedly terrorists' families, and then to burn down the office of the Committee Against Torture. So you never know. In Russia, when you had the bombing of the flats, that bombing of the flats where more than 400 Russians died in Moscow allowed the war in Chechnya to start. A lot of people talk about the original crime of Putin was, because a lot of Russians, even the Russians, I was living in Russia at that time, all the Russians were saying, oh, it's the FSB who did it, and then the war in Chechnya started, and then Putin came to power. So terrorist attacks are always ambiguous. But the thing is, there are terrorists. There is a young generation. When you see the cruelty and the torture that are a daily base here in Chechnya, is that it is giving the rise to thousands of young who are now fighting with Daesh in Libya and Syria. The Chechens are, several thousands are in Libya and Syria, and there are, young people who have been arrested by Kadyrov and torture. So that's when Oleg from the committee says, you fight against terror with methods of terror. That does nourish a new form of terrorism, and when that terrorism will come back to Russia, who knows what will happen.
Yeah, that's what I was asking outside of Grozny.
Yeah.
There was resistance.
Well, there used to be resistance in the mountain close to Georgia, etc., but now they've sort of given up. There are some small pockets, but most of them are fighting with Daesh. Yeah.
We have a question on the side, and then after that, if the microphone can come to the gentleman in the back, and then the gentleman on the side over here. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask a question about whether you'd held back material to protect people, but
yeah.
Of course that came out in the... very quickly, do you have any contingency plans for responding to any attempts to rubbish the program by Putin and co. and Kadyrov and co. when the program is broadcast? And secondly, you made the point that when you were being followed, that there actually, one occasion it was a Russian, and there are very few Russians there. Where is the money for the regime and its security forces and the private army and the buying off of people coming? And as far as you can guess or know, how is that distributed? Thank you.
Not sure I can answer that question. No, so the first question is basically, the film was already shown on Arte, which is a French, German documentary channel, beginning of March, and it was resonance in France, and then I've been showing it in Switzerland and in Belgium, and of course it was on YouTube the next day. So that's the thing about now making films. You know, you can't tell people the authorities won't see the film because the next day it was on YouTube. So. Yeah, but everyone, Kadyrov has seen the film. So basically what happened is the film was shown, but with Arte, there's something called Arte +7, which is basically you can see the film for so many, not 7 days, but it was actually till a few weeks ago, it was still there. But we had blocked the Russian territory. What happened is I went to Prague to show it at the One World Film Festival, and I was interviewed by Radio Liberty, so it's Freedom Europe. And we did a big interview, and without warning me, because as I say, my main concern is the security of the people who were in the film and who helped me. I edited the film with a Chechen friend who works in an NGO and who's close to the Committee Against Torture, and not one single frame or word was edited without having the advice of the NGOs, the committee, the people also. Till the end, the people could say, I don't want to be in the film. We also had a plan with Mark. We managed to smuggle out of Russia our fixers for a month before and after the film was shown. And the people were looked after by the Committee of Torture, and we had a signal if something, the committee is very well connected, they'd know at once if they were at risk, so they'd be taken out of Chechnya. So we'd thought about that for months. And of course, so I give that interview, and the next day I'm contacted by a friend of mine who works for the Sunday Times saying, your film is on the front page of Radio Svoboda, Radio Liberty, take it off, everyone will be arrested. So I ended up day and no one is there. And I panicked, I didn't even know the film was on YouTube. And I finally get the correspondent from Radio Svoboda. I said, oh, well, I saw it on YouTube, so I just put the link. I said, what do you realize? I mean, Arte has blocked the Russian territory. The committee and us have been working for months on how to protect them. So actually, in 2 hours' time in Russia, because everyone was talking about it, because there's nothing on Chechnya anymore, and there were 175,000 tweets on the film inside Russia in just 1 hour and a half. So we blocked the film. I managed to speak to Oleg from the committee the next day. He said, oh, you blocked the film. Actually, since it's blocked, we all say it's the FSB who blocked the film. so anyhow, the film has been shown. My friends who worked with me, with my fixers, one of them was a journalist, and she actually went on all the Facebook of all the pro-Russian, well, all the pro-Kadyrov TV, all the journalists working for the power, basically. And they were saying that it was a CIA film, blah, 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 blah. But they had to recognize it had major artistic qualities. So I thought, okay, that's cool. So I thought I'd made my point there. Maybe I wasn't. But since then, I mean, no one has been approached or threatened. Kadyrov has seen it. I know they're upset by the film. We, in a very sad and cynical way, benefited from the context, because a week before the film was shown in France, Boris Nemtsov was killed. And yes, Nemtsov, as you know, was the main political opposition figure in Russia, and it's the main political assassination since the fall of the Soviet Union in Russia. And what is happening is that they started arresting Chechens, and most of us who know Russia, we sort of said, oh, of course it's the Chechens they're going to arrest. But it turns out that it well may be the Chechens that were arrested that could be responsible for his death. And one of them was a top security officer of Kadyrov. He was number 3 of one of Kadyrov's private guards. He quit that private guard, I think, a few months before Nemtsov was murdered. And he strangely lived at Kadyrov's cousin's place in Moscow. So people are starting to think that Kadyrov might be implicated, and he had already threatened Nemtsov to death. Kadyrov had threatened Anna Politkovskaya to death, had threatened Natalia, and they were all shot. So when the film was shown, basically, Kadyrov had other things to deal with than to trace the people who are in the film, and he still does. And the recent events, apparently, the FSB is strongly, more or less, wanting to get rid of him, because he is. That's the thing that could cause his end. Is he's always been trying to be the best pupil of Putin, but now he's making an excess of, So he said that the guy who did Nemtsov's murder was a hero of Russia. The next day, he was decorated by Putin himself as the hero of Russia, Kadyrov, but so it's a bit contradictory. He recently, also with what happened to the Committee Against Torture, Kalyapin works with the Human Rights Commission next to the Kremlin, so it's not. And just 2 weeks ago, he claimed there was, I don't know if you followed, a young girl of 17 was forced to marry an older man, and Kadyrov, can vote all the foreign press and say Russian laws don't apply in Chechnya. When Putin says there's no Russian soldiers or armed forces in the Donbass in Ukraine, Kadyrov goes on local TV in Chechnya saying we're sending our troops to help the Donbass. When Putin sends Lavrov to demonstrate when in Paris there was a terrible attack against Charlie Hebdo, Kadyrov organizes a massive demonstration of 800,000 Chechens against Charlie Hebdo. So he is, in France you say playing with fire, I don't say in French. So that could cause his end. The problem is that they don't have really anyone, because it's such a dictatorship, that could replace him. And with what's happening in Ukraine, maybe it's not in the interest of the Kremlin to get rid of him and to open a second front, which would be Chechnya. But at the same time, I know from Russians and from foreign correspondents in Moscow that the FSB is fed up with what he's doing. So I don't know what will be reactions when the film will be shown next week on Al Jazeera, because it's true, Al Jazeera, I mean, compared to France and Germany, is a massive audience. Everyone is, we're on warnings. Usually in Chechnya there's a reaction as soon as it happens. I was telling the story earlier, there was another French film where Kadyrov has basically invited a French crew to make a film about him. And they turned out to make a very Fox News-like anti-Kadyrov stuff, and he was so pissed off. He was in Doha and he came back specially the next day and was on TV saying, that French film, everyone will get arrested, and a lot of people got arrested. So when he wants to arrest people, he does it. I think the thing of my film is that it's about people. It's not about the money laundering, the millions that go to Chechnya and that disappear, about the Kadyrov fund, which basically, every Chechen has to give 30% of his salary to the Kadyrov fund. That's it. So I didn't go into that. That's where he gets, the financial questions. That's when he gets really nervous. I was very worried for the old couple, you see, the wonderful couple who've lost their two daughters, although they had said, we are already dead, so we want to speak out. Of course I have a huge responsibility in showing them, but nothing has happened. And actually what has happened is apparently a few weeks ago, someone from the Inquiry Commission actually went to see them to say they might reopen the file. So that means, but they were Russian, so maybe that's, a sign that they're not approving what Kadyrov is doing. And since the film was shown, there's been hundreds of Russians who saw it when it was briefly shown in Russia, who've been calling the Committee Against Torture to help that family. So, but you can never tell. I'm basically every day in contact with everyone, and we have to try and protect anyone. But basically, I think it would have already happened. And in an odd way, I think the film is not making unpleasing the FSB because of what happened to Nemtsov. So it's a very odd, odd games are at stake. But he's never been at that point, kind of overdoing it and making feel he actually can do whatever he wants. And I don't think the Kremlin really appreciates that. Did I answer? And what basically, he's getting billions from the Kremlin, and that's to make order prevail, and he's completely managed to break down the identity of the Chechen people. And actually, I remember when I was living in Russia after the Second War, Putin has said, we want to check conflict, which is basically make Chechens kill each other. And that's what's happening. And that's when I asked why people I filmed, and I saw some students I had filmed 10 years before, they said, we have a nostalgia of the Russian occupation. And during that time, it was terrifying. You had the Zachitsky every week you had hundreds of people being swept and tortured and who disappeared, because they said at least at that time together against an enemy, against fighting together. And today we're killing each other. That's why we're more scared, because now a brother will denounce his brother. And that's the terrifying thing. That's what he's managed to do.
We have time for a couple more questions. So if the mic can come to the gentleman in the back. And then I see there's another question in the front after that.
I was going to ask a couple of questions, but you've really covered the main questions. So I just want to say, brilliant film, brilliant
Thank
journalism, and great music, and just terrific film.
Thank you.
So you've answered my main question.
Okay, thanks a lot. We worked a lot. I had wonderful editors, absolutely wonderful artistic cameramans, and the music was also composed with the film. I mean, it was a film that was a collective film. We really.
Hello. My question is regarding how can you use the film to bring some relief to the people of Chechnya? And I was thinking about the humanitarian. There's very little you can do politically. And I know there's a process which is called what's the word? A humanitarian exhumation, which is about actually bringing relief to the families by letting them find the people who have disappeared, without actually bringing charges or criminal charges against the authorities. And I wondered if, and I know that the European Court of Human Rights and the International Red Cross have initiatives in this area, and I wondered if somehow or other there could be more done with regard to getting the Grozny crowd to actually react to this situation.
Well, that's a big question. I mean, even for all photographers, I think of Stanley Green, who was a wonderful photographer who photographed the wars. We were, I think, between 15 and 20 correspondents going through the war. Even during the war, the crimes were forgotten, and Russia was taken as part of the European Council as one of the main massacres had happened in Chechnya in '95. As for what's happening today, I mean, Kutaev's case, the Committee Against Torture, has just managed to get it to the European Court, and they've accepted to open the file, so which is really good news. Providing it doesn't take too much time, because when you see Medina, who's been fighting for 20 years to find those more than 18,000 disappeared, what she is doing is essential for the memory of the war, because as long as she goes to Strasbourg with her files of the lost ones, the disappeared, the Russian can't close the cases. So as long as Europe and Strasbourg has those files and takes those and accepts the claims, the Russian can't make the files disappear. So it has to go on. Europe, what can Europe do against Kadyrov? I have no idea. I mean, the film was shown at the One World Festival in Brussels like 3 weeks ago, and we won the prize there. And basically, so when we win the prize, it's going to be shown at the European Parliament in October. So I hope, it's little by little. I think now, everyone's seen it in Russia, and now Memorial wants to organize a big show, a premiere in Russia. So I hope I'll get a visa, and I hope we'll be able to see it, because I think it's very important. Russia also. The Red Cross, I mean, it's. I have lots of people who've reacted and who want to help that family. I think we can maybe help individuals, but as to make the regime change, it's it's an absolute dictatorship, as well as a very mafia-like way of ruling. So there's not much we can do, but to work and to now what's happened to the Committee Against Torture, I think they should be a European campaign to support them, because they are working in Russia and prisons, and Igor Kalyapin works at the Council of Human Rights in the Kremlin, that Medvedev created to show Russia was worrying about human rights. So if European institution could support and condemn what has just happened, try and help them. Giving signs is important, not that Kadyrov cares. But as he's now in a more delicate situation because he's overdone it, it could maybe, I don't know. As I was saying, it's very hard to see any hope. But at least for the people who are in that film, for them it's just amazing that you are there tonight. And every time I tell them what's happening and the reactions of the audience, then just they feel less lonely. The loneliness of that old couple, I mean, is with me every day. It's just, and there's so many thousands like that in Chechnya. So, I mean, if you can show it, talk about it, it's just making them less lonely. As to the regime change, I don't know when. And if you want, I mean, I have contacts of Facebook of, the Committee Against Torture, and they can give messages to the people who are in the film. I mean, any message, anything is a big support and warmth to them.
Manon,
old friend from Yeltsin time.
Yes. Congratulations on
Thank
the movie. All the good questions have been asked, but I'm going to broaden it out a bit. Is Grozny a model for what's going to happen in Crimea and eastern Ukraine? Will there be tower blocks in Crimea and Donetsk?
The Donbass city centre.
Is the population going to be bribed till they can't think anymore?
Thanks for the question. I think that anyhow, what Putin has managed to do in Chechnya, I mean, in Chechnya lies a lot of the origin of Putin's power. I remember Anna Politkovskaya that we knew, and she always said that the Chechen war would be a boomerang that would hit Russia, and the violence would just expand to the whole of Russia. And when the film came out, just 5 days after Boris Nemtsov's death, that we knew, and he wasn't a threat to the regime, he would have never been elected. I just, suddenly it was one more political assassination, and you just feel that, what's happening in Russia now is really worrying. And I spent most of the year in Russia going to Chechnya, so I just saw with Ukraine the gap that is created every day by the state propaganda, and it's us and it's them and us, and we're just the hatred that is created every day against, a lot of Russians think with Crimea and with what's happening in Donbass, that we want to humiliate them. As for what's happening in Donbass, I mean, most of the Russian mercenaries there were mercenaries in Chechnya with the same methods. Kadyrov sending hundreds of guys there, a lot of thugs. In the Crimea, I've just learned through Chechen friends that a lot of Chechen millionaires are investing in Crimea. So, the methods, who knows? I don't think it would be exactly the same, and a little North Korea, but I mean, the history repeats itself.
We will have to wrap up here because we're out of time, but thank you so much for being here, Manon, and for sharing all of your knowledge about this and sharing this film with us. Thank you to everyone from Al Jazeera who's here.